Bioenergy Research Consortium, the SBRC. That was established by the Masdar Institute of Science and Technology. The SBRC was established by the Masdar Institute of Science and Technology together with our industry partners who are here with us today. There's no question that Abu Dhabi's commitment to advance breakthrough research that addresses water and food security underpins the nation's transformation into a knowledge-based economy. This research is putting Abu Dhabi in the epicenter of a global movement to produce sustainable bioenergy without using fresh water or arable land. If we consider that 97% of the world's water is in the ocean, and about 20% of the world's landmass is either a desert or an arid region, by combining these two factors, we have a very particular combination that is extremely important in this region of the world. It is no surprise that this research is already drawing significant interest from other countries, especially those looking to expand their pathways into renewable energy research portfolios. Today, we are excited to announce that the world's first research facility to harmoniously produce both food and fuel without using arable land or fresh water will be fully operational in March. Now, I'd like to introduce our distinguished guests. With me on stage, they will be talking about the reason they belong or they are supporting the SBRC. And so we have with us Her Excellency Mariam Mohammed Saeed Khaled, the Assistant Undersecretary of Water Resources and Nature Conservation Affairs with the Ministry of Environment and Water, who recently signed a Memorandum of Understanding with Masdar Institute of Science and Technology. We also have Bernard Dunn, President with Boeing Middle East, North Africa, and Turkey, which is leading a global effort to sustainably develop aviation biofuels, and is a founding member of the SBRC. We have with us Captain Richard Hill, Chief Operations Officer with Etihad Airways, a strong champion of innovative technology to advance the aviation industry, and also a founding member of the SBRC. Finally, we have with us Dr. Michael Berthaud. He is Vice President of Takrir Research Center. Takrir is our most recent member. Their decision to join the SBRC underscores the UAE's unique ability to create a comprehensive biofuel supply chain from research, production, refining, and finally to operational flights. We're going to show a video, a brief video, to introduce the subject matter that we're going to be speaking about. So if we can actually go ahead and show the video.
We now live in a world with over 100,000 flights per day and an ever-growing need for fuel. With this in mind, the aviation industry has committed to major carbon reduction goals, which can only be achieved with lower carbon fuels. These alternative fuels can be made from organic matter like plants and agricultural waste. This means that we can generate fuel from natural resources. Producing this biofuel isn't simple though, especially in the UAE, a nation surrounded by an arid desert environment with limited fresh water. In fact, only 3% of the world's water is fresh water, of which 1.5% is locked in glaciers. The remaining 97% is seawater. Etihad Airways, along with the Masdar Institute, Boeing and others, are looking into how we can produce alternative fuels for the industry in areas where production supports food security and ensures freshwater conservation. The answer is in the integrated seawater energy and agriculture system, a mechanism designed to help with food security and produce the raw materials used to make aviation fuel. So, how does it work? Fish farms can be a vital part of food security, but produce a lot of wastewater. We can use this wastewater as a fertilizer to grow and irrigate our saltwater tolerant plants. These desert-loving plants feed off this nutrient-rich saltwater and can be harvested into aviation biofuel. We can then use mangroves to fully utilize nutrients before the cleaned water is returned to the sea. The mangrove's extensive root system also provide valuable carbon storage. This system doesn't compete with food, it complements it. It supports sustainable fisheries and provides a sustainable feedstock for making biofuel. That's what we call harmonious food and fuel production.
This is where the facility is located. It's located in Masdar City. We have 4 swamps or 4 basins where we will be growing mangroves. The water will be circulating in this closed loop system to mimic what happens in a natural system out in a coastal site. And so this is a 20,000 square meter facility. We have a reservoir that will also be storing water, and we have tanks that will be helping us in the operation of the system. A year ago, I showed you a picture of what the site looked like, and it was basically a barren piece of land. And so I'd like to show you what we have today. And this is the picture of the facility just about a week ago. We are now in the process of filling the facility with seawater. We have begun the process of filling the aquaculture ponds, which you can see at the very front of the photograph. And then behind that we have the salicornia fields, and all the way towards the end we have our mangrove wetlands. You can also see that the IRENA building is there and Masdar Institute is there. So this is the picture that is included in your memory sticks. For those of you who did not get a memory stick, those of you, those members of the press that did not get a memory stick, I'd like you to get in touch with Maggie Brown. Maggie is back here helping us with the media engagement. So if any of you are missing all of the material that we just talked about here is in that memory stick. So with this, I'd like now to invite our subject experts from Boeing. We have with us the Director of Sustainable Aviation Biofuel Strategy, Darren Morgan. Darren, please come up. And with Etihad Airways, we have the Head of Environment, Lyndon Koppel. Please join us. And so we will are now ready to take your questions. If you have any questions, please do raise your hand. Tell us where you are from, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Technica, I know this isn't in operation yet, but so far, have you identified what would be your primary technology challenges in getting this whole thing to work together?
Well, there are several technology challenges that we will be facing, not the least of which, of course, is the growth of plants with salt water. So these plants grow naturally in coastal deserts around the world. It's what we would call still a wild plant. It's not been domesticated. And so there's a lot of research that needs to be done to be able to create a consistent morphology in the plant and in a way that we would like the plant to behave, if you will. As you may imagine, in plants that we use in our everyday lives, plants that we use to feed ourselves, there has been years and years and years, decades, hundreds of years of cultivation and of crossbreeding and of agricultural engineering. And so we will be working to make this plant a plant that gives it naturally gives oil seeds and it naturally gives lignocellulosic material. But we will be working to create a plant that is consistent and that is predictable so that we can produce it at scale. And so one of the biggest challenges that this pilot project will allow us to answer is many of these technical challenges, the salinity of the water, the nutrient level that is coming out of the aquaculture ponds, whether the aquaculture facility is best using or growing a monoculture in terms of either fish or shrimp or a polyculture. The mangroves, how well they absorb the remaining nutrients in the water, how fast they grow, both the mangroves and the plants. So all of these questions will be answered through this research facility, and this research will allow us to actually take the next step, which is to take it to a commercial or pre-commercial stage, which is to grow to this is a 2-hectare facility. So the idea is that the next step will be to grow to a 200-hectare facility.
Just a quick follow-up. So you're saying that actually growing the plants is, that's what's not settled yet? Like the creation of the fuel from once you have the raw product, I'm sorry. The creation of the fuel from the raw product is technology that's pretty standard right now? Really what's new is the plants?
So for the most part, there are some challenges when dealing with this type of biomass, because as you know, this biomass grows with salt water. So there are some challenges related to how we handle the feedstock before putting it into the refining process. So yes, there is also research related to that. But you're right, for now we have commercial pathways that allow us to take a vegetable oil and take it to a synthetic paraffinic kerosene, which is an alternative to jet fuel. And the same is true for the lignocellulosic material. We did, when we launched Biojet Abu Dhabi last year, we did a flight with some other pathway that is also ready for commercial use. So those pathways for turning different feedstocks into commercially viable jet fuel are for the most part in place, but I would ask Darren to expand on that if he wants.
Do you want me to?
Well, I don't want to use up everybody else's time, so if nobody else has any questions, yeah, I'm interested.
Sure, happy to elaborate a little bit. As he mentions, there are an increasing number of pathways that have been approved. When we started on this journey about a decade ago, we thought it was going to take 15 years to get the first pathway approved because approval for aviation is very difficult and our safety standards and our quality is very high. It turns out to be a lot easier because it turns out that with biogenic sources of fuels, you can cater, you can create the material you want to start with from the beginning. Fundamental difference with petroleum is what it is. You get it out of the ground and it is what it is. With biogenic sources, you can cause the material to be what you want it to be as you go through the process. And so it turns out, and this is something aviation is driven, this is something that's fundamental to the biogenic pathways for fuels. It turns out that there are many more pathways to get plant material into fuels than people thought. And so over the past decade, many of these companies, notwithstanding financial crises and other issues in oil prices today, are continuing to develop these pathways to get their fuel into aviation. So there are right now 3 pathways approved for aviation fuel. There are another half dozen or so that are in work. right now through the Global Aviation Fuel Approval System, and there will be more to come. And so for us, this gives us a lot of optimism that it's not a question of whether we can get the fuel out of this system into, the biomass into the system into a fuel. It's just a question of which pathway and which set of options are going to manifest themselves, and that's something that we and Etihad and others in the industry are working on very carefully.
Rasha, I'm from Etihad newspaper. I just want to ask, you said about the commercial stage. Do you have any plan when are you expecting the commercial stage to start, maybe for the biofuel? Maybe do you have any plan for the next how many years, for example?
Sure. So the research facility we have just completed is going to be operational for the next 3 years. But of course, we will be answering questions all the time. And so our expectation is to be able to grow to a pre-commercial facility, I'm going to say in the next 5 years. And by pre-commercial, I will say that, in terms of land, it will probably be around 200 hectares in size. But within those 200 hectares, we will have the same system, meaning aquaculture, halophyte agriculture, and then agroforestry with the mangroves. At that stage, for the UAE, it will be a commercial aquaculture farm, because there are very few aquaculture farms that are actually commercial here in the UAE, and I would let either Dr. Rashid or Her Excellency say more on that. But for sure, it would be a size that is already of significance, not from the biomass side. And so for the biomass to be produced at scale, we need a lot more than that. But that pre-commercial stage will allow us to answer questions that will allow the scalability question to be answered more fully.
I'll add a little bit to that.
Yes, please.
Yeah. We know generally what the business case needs to look like for the entire system. What we don't know is when you put all the parts and pieces together in an integrated fashion like this pilot does, is our conceptual understanding of the system, theoretical understanding of the system, does it match actually on the ground how this pilot facility performs economically? And so, the beauty of the pilot facility is we will finally be able to test the theories in terms of economics that we think are directionally correct and positive. But until we have the pilot facility and are able to prove it with actual on-ground performance, it's all conceptual. So, my view is in the next year, we're going to have a very good understanding once the pilot facility is up and going, and about a year after that. So, in March, give it 1 more year. We'll have a pretty good idea of the overall business case viability, and therefore how much R&D needs to be done henceforth. It could be that we get this pilot facility up and going, and it's actually not that far from economic viability. That's possible. Probably there'll be some more work done. The question is how much. So 5 years, 3 years, could be more or less. But the important part, I think, of this is to add to the comments that were made earlier, is there are far more countries starting to look at this set of pathways around the world. And that's absolutely true. We are engaged with countries around the world, and we get pulled into the table to talk about halophytes and these pathways by many countries at very senior levels for exactly the same reason that is happening here. The great news from the perspective of UAE is UAE really is in a leadership position. Many people want to see what is happening here. And that's a good thing. We want to keep that momentum going here.
My name is Abir Abdel Halim. I'm a reporter in the Imarat newspaper. I just wanted to ask about the important or essential foodstuff which will be produced in the project. All the time there's concentration about the biofuel, not on the food. I want to ask about the second thing. I want to be sure Captain Hill spoken about $23.9 billion investments in this project, or as in all the world to produce this biofuel. I can't understand. I want to be sure. Thanks.
So, as you, perhaps I should have shown for those of you who have not seen this before, I should have shown the conceptual diagram for the system that we're developing, which is the seawater energy and agriculture system. But it basically consists of aquaculture ponds. And so in the aquaculture ponds, you will be producing fish and shrimp. So that's the main food item that you will be producing. Okay? So while the fish and shrimp grow, they generate waste. That waste goes into the water. And so in traditional aquaculture operations, you have to take that water out and replenish it with fresh water, fresh seawater. And so instead of returning that water full of waste, or in this case full of nutrients, to the ocean, we use it as irrigation water for these fields of salicornia plants. The figure that Captain Hill was referring to was the global figure for biofuels. I'm not sure if it was in the aviation sector or...
No, it was global, and it was the second generation biofuels.
Second generation biofuels. So it talks about lignocellulosic ethanol. It talks about different biofuels that are being developed and actually produced.
What's the investment expected in this project, your project?
Sorry, what's the question? Yeah, we don't disclose amounts. Like enough to make it work, to find out.
Any other questions?
Jonathan Porritt from the UK, and in this instance an advisor to Air New Zealand. There have been a lot of false starts around different pathways, as you describe them, and a lot of hope has been invested in this to find alternatives to jet fuel. As you've been doing your modelling, looking forward, can you actually tell me how many hectares of halophyte you would need to fly one of your mainstream jets from here to London? So I'm just trying to get a sense of the scale of this as you do your back-of-the-envelope calculations. I know it's a long way to go, but just give us a sense of the hectareage that would be involved to get any kind of scaled contribution to substituting for jet fuel. I know you won't be competing for that land, because it's not the kind of land that's going to be used for agriculture, but I still don't have in my mind, are we talking thousands of hectares, are we talking millions of hectares? Just give me a sense of what the scale of this looks like.
So it's a really good point to illustrate a very important point, which is the primary driving thought about this system is that this is not about making jet fuel per se. In fact, jet fuel is only going to be one of many, many valorizable outputs that in their creation hopefully solve problems like freeing aquaculture from pollution, etc. And so it's a little bit of a push to say that, well, these hectares are dedicated to aviation fuel. In fact, if the system works, it's not going to economically be driven primarily by aviation. We're most interested in the outcomes, so that's why we're investing so much. But in fact, most of the product is going to be going into many other things, and this is one of the things we're going to explain with the pilot facility, is what are the valorizable outputs. So it's a little bit, I know there's a temptation to ask the question of how many hectares, but the reality is the system is going to be producing many things, as we were talking about earlier, food, fuel, fiber, all kinds of other things. And so to say, well, these hectares are related to aviation fuel, that's really not quite how it's going to work. And so it's not fair, it's almost not an accurate question to ask. The right question to ask is, what's the economic value proposition of this entire system? How does that compare to traditional agricultural today? And or how does that compare to the economic value of the land that it would be utilized on today? In most cases, arid desert land is not that valuable, and there's not much being valorized off of it, notwithstanding what might be underneath it in this part of the region. But in many parts of the region, there's not anything underneath it, and it's very, very low value. And in fact, sadly, there's more desertification going on than less. And so the question is really, economically, what do you want to do to mitigate desertification and to mitigate the problem of a growing, fast-growing aquaculture industry that has no solution for the waste, right? And so that question you asked is an interesting question, but it's actually, in my view, it kind of is a sub to a much higher level and a more profound level of sort of what this system is about, right? It's not gallons per hectare. To think of it like that is to necessarily sort of miss the point, in my view. So I'm giving you what I think is a better question to ask, and the answer is that's what we're going to try to figure out with the pilot, is what's the value proposition of this entire economic system, of which the fuels for aviation are going to be probably a relatively minor player in the overall value picture. That's our guess. That's what the pilot is about. Is that?
And those are the preliminary numbers that we're getting, but yes. I'm sorry, you were gonna.
No, thank you. That was a very interesting way of not answering my question, which I appreciate. And I don't disagree with what you've just said, but I'm interested in trying to, at this early stage, to work out whether this is forever going to be a small and interesting niche in the world of biofuels, or whether there is any potential for scale. That's what I'm really getting.
So I'll give you an example. Do you want to talk about the green diesel approval?
No, you can talk about that, but
Yeah,
just before that, I think one of the important things is that this is potentially replicable in areas around the world, that it can significantly help with their economic development. I mean, this system is based on something that was originally trialled, I think it was in Eritrea. Unfortunately, the civil war there stopped that. So they saw that it wasn't for jet fuel, but it was for the ground transport diesel market. So it's something that has been trialled, and I think, sadly, if it hadn't been for the Civil War, then we would have seen much more progress in that area. So whilst for us, I mean, obviously, as Etihad, we're investing in this because we see this as being a potential and maybe one of many sources of alternative fuels that will help us to manage our carbon emissions in the long term. We're also, a key player in Abu Dhabi. We want to be supporting innovation, we want to be supporting diversifying the economy, and we see this as a way of supporting that as part of our role as a big Abu Dhabi entity. But I think it is important to say that this, we hope, will be replicated. So wherever there is fish farming, I mean, the discussions we've had with our environment agency here, then you really need to be talking about this as a solution to a pollution problem. Because basically what we're saying is wherever there is aquaculture, then that is where we can develop our system. We can get a potential fuel and other products from cleaning up the system.
To address the issue of scale, which I think is kind of underlying part of your question, to give you an example of how this is not niche, and I mean aviation biofuel, Boeing is leading the approval for a type of advanced biofuel that's already on the market. It's being sold into the diesel industry and for ground transportation. Boeing took a very close look at the chemical composition of that currently sold renewable diesel product. It's a hydrocarbon-based renewable diesel product. There's about 5 billion liters of that already produced in the world, and it's more or less cost competitive. The transaction prices that are occurring between buyer and sellers are at fossil diesel and fossil jet prices. We realize that fuel is actually at or above the requirements for aviation. It's just that because of some quirks in the aviation approval that we put in for the first round of renewable aviation fuel, that tranche of fuel was excluded. So we've gone back and we're going to change the current specification for biokerosenes to include that 5 billion liters of existing capacity into the jet fuel specification. If you want to know more about that, you can look it up online. We've announced it in the press and we're doing this. We expect later this year that fuel to be approved, and that's 5 billion liters. If you add that up, it works out to somewhere between 1% and 2% of all aviation fuel demand can be addressed by that market, and there are already airlines negotiating to buy that product at cost competitive prices around the world. So this is not small, this is not niche, this is not maybe someday. There are different technologies coming along. Some of them may or may not work, but the reality is there's already a lot of it out there, and it's going to hit the market soon, and this is what we've been trying to foment all along. Is that that particular fuel approval and pathway, is that the answer? No, that's one of the answers. It's just one. But that one answer, later this year is going to get us somewhere between 1% and 2% at cost competitive prices. And so when we're talking about these new biological pathways to make fuels and the kinds of things that need to happen to make that occur, the trends, the technology trends are very favorable from what we see, even at today's low oil prices.
Sure. Marwan?
Thank you very much. My name is Marwan Tamimi from Masdar Institute. It's clear that the system is working very well around the world, but in the UAE we have a very harsh, arid environment. Let's say, how do you foresee the impact of the environment and the change between summer, season, and winter? It's almost always summer here, but there is discrepancy temperature and salinity wise, also seawater salinity. How do you foresee the impact on the efficiency of the system here, specifically in this environment? And would it be feasible to put the system in a controlled environment where you control the salinity and temperature, for instance, to maintain a certain efficiency? I don't know if it's feasible. Thank you.
You're absolutely right. The conditions in the UAE are extremely harsh, and actually that is part of the point. That's precisely why the UAE was chosen as the place to do this, because if we're able to do this here with the extreme conditions in terms of temperature, salinity, etc., it will give us a lot of answers that are at the, I would say, at the, on the fringes of the extremity that this system will be able to tolerate. And so, definitely, it's going to be a challenge. The high salinity in the water that we have here, traditional seawater, 33, 35 parts per thousand. Here, 44, 46. Temperature of the water is a very big challenge for the fish. Is a very big challenge for the plants. And yes, those are all very important questions. But part of the idea here is that we're actually also using other technologies that are being developed at Masdar Institute to actually integrate into this entire piece. And so the facility, just as an example, the facility is being powered by solar energy. So that's not a technology that Masdar Institute is developing, but we are developing how we integrate these technologies into different economic pathways. And so that's an interesting question that we will also be exploring. But for sure, very big challenges in terms of salinity, in terms of temperature, in terms of the sand itself. And so I think that those are the questions that we're going to be exploring. So, yeah. The other point I was going to make is that the pilot facility is designed in a way that we are able to control salinity. It's a closed system where we will be monitoring the salinity in the system, and our idea is to have it operate in the conditions we have here. We won't be able to control the temperature, the outside temperature. That is what it is, right? But we may have to control the temperature in the water, and of course the salinity in the water. Any other questions?
Are there other agricultural products you could imagine leveraging out of this? Because you could, are there other aquatic trees that you can imagine generating useful products? Because if you take Darren Morgan's arguments to their fullest conclusion, one could imagine actually that the fuel component is just used to power the agriculture, which is a perfectly legitimate outcome if you have other additional agricultural products.
Well, I think that part of what we're doing here is creating a different agriculture industry. And it very much to that point, the products that will come out of it, we're already seeing a number of products that are there. And there has been research that indicates that there are other very important and interesting products that can come out of this. And so, yeah, maybe at the very end, there is no fuel for aviation. But I don't think our partners will be too unhappy about that, because that means that the system is working well and it's producing economic value.
One of the fundamentals for aviation that we kind of know well, but maybe a lot of people don't, so I'll repeat it, maybe you've heard it, is we're going to be using liquid fuels for a very long time. The advent of battery-powered aviation is a long way off. The economics, the weight penalties for aviation are huge. So motive forms of energy that are the way the same or close to today's chemical fuels, batteries are a very, very, very long way off. Magnitudes of order, many magnitudes of order off. So we're going to be using liquid hydrocarbons for a very long time. And further, the fact that the paraffin and kerosenes, the pure paraffin and kerosenes, which are already approved, have higher energy density to them, it means the value proposition for our industry, because weight is such a premium in our industry, there's a non-linear value to those couple percentage points of higher energy density that are out there today with existing kerosene. So there's that piece. But then to answer your question more broadly, yeah, there's very likely going to be valorizable products and commodities that will come out of this system, and that's one of the things that we're going to be studying. Food fiber fuel, chemicals, yes, that's part of why we're excited about this, is that it's not just about the fuel. It can't be.
Very much for coming. We are extremely pleased to be part of this unique and very exciting project. Not only is it a project that covers so many environmental sectors, it's a project that promotes environmental sustainability. It's an innovative project. It's looking at alternative natural resources, and we're so pleased to do this project with such strong partners as we have here today. In particular, this integrated approach is basically showing how synergies can be used at its best. So we're looking at our state here in the UAE. We don't have arable land, we don't have fresh water. So what do we have? We have seawater, we have the sun. So we're putting the resources together that we do have and putting it into a system where we're actually producing food and fuel in a sustainable manner. So it's an extremely exciting pilot project, and as Dr. Alejandro said, a lot of eyes are looking at us, and the part of the ministry in this project will be to provide the juveniles for the ponds, and also providing the seedlings, the mangrove seedlings, which will be used to filter the water before it goes back to the sea, or in the pilot project it'll be recirculated. So this is the part the ministry is going to be doing, and the expertise, of course, in this field. Of course, this project, being a project that's promoting sustainability, will be an icon or a pioneering project showing how food and fuel are produced in a sustainable manner. So we're extremely excited for that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now, I'd like to welcome Bernard Dunn, Boeing President of the Middle East, North Africa, and Turkey.
Thank you, Alejandro, and thank you, Your Excellency, Miriam Mohammed. Boeing is proud to be part of the SBRC in helping to develop sustainable aviation biofuel industry in the UAE. With more than 30 million commercial flights flown worldwide every year, commercial aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. Boeing is committed to reducing that carbon footprint and to advancing the aviation industry's commitment to sustainable business practices by developing technologies with the promise of producing a clean alternative fuel supply. As an industry, we have set aggressive targets to reduce emissions, including carbon neutral growth from the year 2020 and reducing industry CO2 emissions by 50% by the year 2050, as compared to levels reached in 2005. To do this, we're doing several things, one of which is developing renewable fuels that reduce CO2 emissions. We have made tremendous progress on biofuel development in less than a decade. As of today, more than 2,000 commercial flights have flown using sustainable aviation biofuel blended with conventional petroleum jet fuels, since renewable jet fuel was approved for commercial use in 2011, only 4 years. When produced sustainably, studies show that biofuel reduces carbon dioxide by 50 to 80% as compared to petroleum fuel through the fuel's life cycle. Furthermore, this project really is a game changer as it harmoniously produces both food and fuel without using arable land or fresh water. Boeing is in great company, partnering with Masdar, Etihad Airways, Takrir, and others in this venture. We are committed, just like our SBRC partners, to develop sustainable aviation biofuel. This is part of our global effort to reduce aviation's environmental impact, and we're proud to be involved in the effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to welcome Chief Operations Officer with Etihad Airways, Captain Richard Hill.
Thank you, Alejandro. Our region's aviation industry is growing at an extraordinary pace to meet the rising demand for travel. To put that fast-paced growth into perspective a bit, growth of Middle East aviation has outpaced the global average and will continue to do so. Air travel in the Middle East is forecast to grow at an annual compound rate of 4.9%, and within the UAE even higher at an estimated 5.6%. It is forecast that there will be demand in the Middle East for 3,180 new aircraft over the next 20 years. And at Etihad Airways, we're expanding at a rapid pace to keep up with the demand. But we, just as Boeing, recognize the importance of developing alternative fuels for the future sustainability of our airline industry. That is why we are committed to this partnership and this pilot project. This pilot project is a great example of the public-private collaboration Etihad Airways sees as essential to stimulating innovation and driving real change within the transportation industry. We expect this pilot project to demonstrate the commercial viability of an integrated, sustainable approach to producing fuel on a large scale. With the global second-generation biofuels, that is advanced biofuels market, estimated to reach $23.9 billion by 2020. This project could deliver Abu Dhabi with a valuable asset to further reinforce its burgeoning knowledge-based economy. As Alejandro pointed out earlier, this project could put the UAE at the epicenter of a global movement to produce food and fuel. The pilot project of the SBRC is a great advancement in the development of sustainable technologies, and we're excited to lead our expertise to support the project that will drive change within the transportation industry, not only in the Middle East, but worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. Now I'd like to turn it over to the Vice President of Takrir Research Center, Dr. Michael Berthaud.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. I'm very pleased to be standing up here with the other SBRC partners today and participating in this event. The synergies between these partners and their specific industries, from education and research to the environment, transportation to technology, was something that was very appealing to us. Developing a viable aviation biofuel industry requires developing supply chains that replicate and parallel the stages of the current petroleum jet fuel chain as far as possible. This is something we know a lot about and have an expertise to offer. We believe the development of a robust biofuel supply chain complements our future plan to meet the rapid, growing demand for jet fuel at both a local and regional level, and it is in line with our ad hoc sustainability policy. Takrir is proud to extend under ad hoc guidance and through our research center, which I represent, all possible support and assistance to the success of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Berthaud, and thank all the speakers. We will now have a photo opportunity with our guests, and so for those of you who want to take a picture, we invite